Hi, I'm JJ. Welcome or welcome back. I did a reread this month of Moby-Dick. The first time I read it, I didn't do any research. I was just trying to make my way through the classics. So I read it a couple of years ago. It was okay. I don't think I understood it. So this time around, I researched it. I even did like a short online class that was talking about a bunch of different classics, including not just Moby Dick, but Herman Melville's inspiration and intentions and stuff while writing it. And so, with that in mind, rereading it, I really saw it a lot differently, and I was able to pick different things. And I know I'm probably not sure or right about all of these concepts, but it did make me a lot more interested in reading it and trying to find all the links and almost Easter eggs that he had within it. So that made it a lot more enjoyable. And I do have this version, which is pretty cool. There's not a whole lot of extra commentary. I would like to get one, but I didn't need that at this moment just because I had done a lot of other research. But what was fun about this is there's art in it. And so even with just the first sentence, it's artistic and fun. There's lots of, when they're talking about the different nautical things, especially like harpoons and stuff, there's pictures of it to try to understand a little bit what they're talking about. And then also there is a bunch of little clips here at the beginning where it's all different references to whales, sperm whales, leviathans, throughout history, throughout literature and stuff, just to kind of understand where he was coming from and how big it was at the time that he was writing it, since a lot of these were quite old references. So that was kind of fun to look through. So this one is the Arian Press, I think Arian, and it's the California edition. So it's a little bit bigger than regular book size, but I did enjoy the art in it. So starting with the first line, "Call me Ishmael," you get this sense that it feels like the beginning of a tall tale. You don't quite know if you're supposed to believe everything that he's telling you, but you do know that it's not going to be straightforward, and there's going to be some of the narrators injecting his thoughts and stuff in it, which is what we get a lot of. And what I didn't realize the first time into it is he was a whaler himself, and he was on ships a lot on Melville. So he understood how there's some days where there's a whole lot of action and you spotted your whale, and it's, this fight for life, fight for wealth and money, trying to bring this whale in. But then you have days and days of just being on the open sea with just your crewmates or your thoughts. And I feel like that's what he was writing the book like. So he's it goes spurts of really high action, and then his meditations on a whole lot of stuff. And at first glance, it does feel kind of like a meditation on life in general. It gives you a lot of information about whaling and whales and the culture back then. You get religious sermons and all this stuff. So it feels like, a person's meandering thoughts, their kind of stream of consciousness as they're thinking about one thing or another while they're in this seclusion and this just loneliness of being at sea. Completely different for Ishmael, who was getting restless on shore, so he couldn't wait to go to sea. But then you have these long moments where it's just as boring, and there's really no escape this time around. So where you're getting this, what could be meditations, instead what you're getting is glimpses of like sociology, philosophy, theology, mixed in with the adventure of the story. And so you have these things where you're wondering why he's just, paused the action to be talking about the bodies of whales and the importance of oil, or the laws of the sea and all that, and you're wondering where that all comes in, and why can't we just get back to the story? Or at least the first time around I was. This time around I actually found myself more interested in those meandering paths that he took, because I knew that's where the meat of the story was and what he was really trying to tell us. And the action bits are the parts that are supposed to keep you motivated to keep trying to read along. Or at least that's how it felt this time around. Whereas before, you're trying to slowly get through all the other stuff so you can jump into the part that you're interested in. It was really interesting kind of having that flipped this time around. So anyway, when we meet Ishmael on the shore, like I said, he's restless. He's looking for a boat. He wants to try his hand at whale hunting, essentially. He's been on merchant ships before and stuff, but he wants to try something different. And while he's on shore, he attends this church, and he talks in great detail about walking into this church, and you're seeing all these, depictions of whales and stuff like that. And then the sermon is about the biblical story of Jonah, who basically was told to try to preach God's word in this more dangerous area, and didn't want to do it. So he fled, and then he basically got caught up inside of a whale. And it's all about God's wrath in having somebody directly disobey his orders, and how Jonah could not escape that. That's what the sermon was about. And so he goes into detail about the biblical story, but also the sermon, and what the preacher is taking away from that story. And what's important there is we're getting so much foreshadowing. It's essentially the concept of Chekhov's gun. If it's mentioned, there is a purpose for it. He wasn't just writing this story that was wasting a whole bunch of time. He had a purpose for each of those random seeming stories that he was telling. And the first one was God's wrath, disobeying his orders, and how a whale is involved in that. And we see it almost immediately. We're supposed to be understanding the importance of that sermon. And then he meets Queequeg, and I don't know if that's how you pronounce the name, Queequeg, but he is a cannibal from Polynesian country, and he's obviously not the Christian that Ishmael is, and we see the distinction and kind of get to explore other religions in meeting Queequeg and seeing possibly another way of things. kind of bucking up against what Christians would call, savages, or all the reasons why they felt that they needed to tame these savages. He's supposed to be describing this horrible character that needs to be Christianized. But as you meet and get to know him, he's gentle and he's a really great character. And it kind of shows you that bucking of his first basically impressions, but also bucking for the different religions and how that kind of plays out later. And then we also as he's becoming friends and rooming with Queequeg, we get them searching for this ship to be on, and we hear the name Ahab for the first time, Captain Ahab. It is literally mentioned in reference to the biblical character King Ahab, who once again received warning after warning about God's judgment if he continued on his evil path and didn't change his ways. And once again mentions and references the wrath of God. So once again, this is foreshadowing and alluding to the biblical story, just like Jonah, and how God does not take kindly to people who go against his direct orders, but also how Ahab's downfall in the biblical story was his continued obsession with false gods. And so just given that specific name and having that be a reference, and then having Ishmael himself connect that, we get to see his intensive religious background, but we get to see him already kind of thinking about who this Ahab character might be. And so we then finally get to be on the ship, and I actually really liked all that backstory and understanding and exploring. And after we get on the ship is when it kind of goes into those essays and stuff about different topics and different facts, as you're getting to also hear about Captain Ahab's story, about why he lost his leg, why he has this vendetta against Moby-Dick, and essentially wants to stop all regular whaling and just go after this whale in revenge. And at first, the crew members are feeling bad for him and agreeing with that idea, because he shows them how ruthless that Moby-Dick is, and how he is justified in his hatred for him and therefore the revenge he wants to take. But then as his obsession continues to get to the more dangerous, like crazy obsession, they try to talk sense into him, and he won't have it. He's willing to put all their lives at risk just for this one specific whale. And that's the meat of the ongoing story. But as you get to continue seeing these different my cats are fighting, sorry. These different experiences and how they unfold in different versions of his basically his detours, his side quests, and how it kind of brings it all together in this story. I hope they don't really hurt each other right now. Sometimes they do, and I'm sorry for that. So what is being said in all those backstories is the fact that he gives you so much knowledge about this whaling industry. You can tell that it's important to him, and he's very well versed on it, but it's almost like this love-hate relationship because he appreciates the whales, he appreciates the culture, he appreciates the history of it, but he can see the destruction in it, and how we're always at such a dichotomy of when you're talking specifically about capitalism, which is what he kind of brought it along to, is taken to its limits, how detrimental it is to society and within the story to the crew that Ishmael joins. So he keeps bringing it up as being the top form of wealth and power, and essentially whale oil lights the world, and how the world couldn't exist without them, which, when you think about it, was exactly how they spoke about cotton and sugar and all the other forms of colonization that led to slavery. And so I'm trying to get my cats to not hurt each other. I'm sorry about that disruption again. And so he keeps connecting the need for this oil, using it even for how oil is, the very best of the oil is used to anoint kings, and therefore it's a royal thing that is needed. And he talks about royalty and kings and imperialism within this whaling industry. And so as he discusses imperialism, colonization, you can see as he starts to not just talk about how much he loves whaling, but he starts exploring the darker sides of it. You can see his own personal beliefs in anti-slavery that he was trying to put across, and how instead of just justifying whaling as a great job, he starts to show the brutality of it when he talks in detail about how it works when you're killing a whale, and he's talking about that kind of destruction. And you can see how alongside this necessary thing that they believe the world needs with capitalism and colonization, you actually get to see the brutality that the advancement brings. And so all of these reasons for colonization and owning land and new empires and all that stuff, you get to see how that kind of starts going to, well, they want to own the sea, they want to own what's in the sea. And then he talks, and it's a really great chapter when he talks about fast fish and loose fish and the law. He talks about how possession is basically the law, and if you get a whale and there's other harpoons in it, they also now belong to you, because the whale is now yours because it is in your possession. And he mentioned the laws used and how it determines who owns what, all to say later on that we're having this desire to own everything, like you might own people or a place or a thing today, but because of circumstances, because everybody is grabbing at things and wanting to get their hands on their own power, that you could be the one who is owned by somebody else tomorrow. And so don't pay so much attention to what you possess and how it came to be and why you possessed it, and think more about what possessing things actually means. And so he really went into detail on that. And he also went in later about the American buffalo and the westward expansion and how that became this extinction of the buffalo, because people wanted and wanted and wanted, and there was this destruction from this kind of advancement and this ownership that they felt that they had, and how he's comparing that to what could happen with the whaling industry. What would happen if whales were extinct? Then the thing that lights the world would no longer exist, and then we would have no light in the world, which essentially means no civilization when you take it to that point. And so he was warning us about this need to advance and control. And then you get, along with that, this lust for wealth and power, which is embodied in the whaling industry, could mean extinction for whales, but possibly, you could put that further on for anything. Mentioned alongside the decline in Ahab's sanity as he continues to get more and more obsessed. And so instead of regular capitalism, where he's just going to go after whales because you're making so much money by getting this whales, like whale oil, he talked for most of the book about how much money you make by getting whales. He's bypassing all these other whales just to go after Moby-Dick. And how we, as a society who is focused on wealth or power, starts to essentially focus on one thing to the destruction of all others, and how if you're not careful, you could end up like Ahab and all of his shipmates that were enabling him up until it was too late. Moby-Dick itself is representative of God's wrath. We were foreshadowed long ago that not changing your ways, that going down this destructive path is going to lead to destruction for yourself and those around you. And so it represents the wrath of God. But you can also almost subvert that in showing, like the speech that when they're trying to talk Ahab out of his obsession, and he's saying essentially, well, I would be mad at lightning and anything in nature that destroyed me. I would strike back at it. And so how we always tend to personify catastrophes of nature that are actual just nature being nature as God's wrath. The whale is just being a whale. And by personifying it, by giving it this evil purpose or this meaning, it just goes to show how far you can stretch the Christianity into bad effects. And also the idea of white as evil also subverts racism, because a lot of times black was used as bad or something negative or not wanted or just not good. And he goes on and talks about all the things that are white that are bad, including and especially Moby-Dick, but like folk stories and stuff about pale creatures. When you think about even like vampires and stuff, they're usually a bit paler, even so, than normal humans. And so it subverts that and makes white evil. And when you put that in context of colonization and imperialism and capitalism, along with the religious text that he keeps referencing, it almost feels like he is criticizing the whole idea of manifest destiny, where America was essentially colonized by religious zealots who thought that it belonged to them, and therefore indigenous lives were destroyed. The slave trade was expanded, and like the horrors of all of those things, all because you think that you are more worthy of it than anyone else. And he seems to be criticizing that in effect, because what happens in the story is Ahab's obsession and his rightness destroys the whole ship, and all the harpooners that are tasked with the most dangerous job to get him this whale, none of them are white. So it almost recreates the idea of that manifest destiny and this white is right and might is right, and how he kills all these innocent people just because of this obsession with, in his mind, what he deserves, what he wants. But in the overall story that Herman Melville is trying to say, in the midst of expanding and not controlling imperialism, capitalism, colonization, and how those are destructive to the people that it is affecting, and a large minority, or a large majority of those are non-white people. And so in that essence, once again, white is evil, just like Moby-Dick. And there's just so many layers that you can get from this. I loved delving deeper into it this time around, and just seeing all the connections and how he would reference something and then it would come to pass later in what happened specifically on the ship. But then also knowing where he was coming from at a political level and what he was searching for and trying to say. You can see little glimpses of that throughout the story, which like I said, I missed horribly the first time around, and I'm really glad that I reread it, because I got so much more out of it this time, and I feel like this is one of them that if you discuss it and meditate on it, reread it multiple times, you're gonna get even richer context, richer experiences, and a deeper understanding of the world that he was trying to show. Whether he was trying to warn about what he believed was bad and needed to be criticized and addressed, or the idea that within this crew there was this brotherhood, that it didn't matter race or religion. They had each other's back for the most part. They were trying to make it through this adventure that Ahab was taking them on. And obviously they don't make it except for Ishmael. But you can see this real camaraderie start to form amongst them as he starts to describe more and more of his cabin mates and shipmates. And so going from this was written just before the American Civil War, as there's the brutal fight, and the fact that he could write it and have one of the semi-main characters being a cannibal with tattoos, who was not Christian and not white, was very significant, especially the fact that he showed them sharing a bed together, not just a room together, they had to share a bed. And in a time when racism was rampant in the United States, not that it isn't any still, but segregation and all that stuff, where there was no kind of camaraderie outside of something possibly like this, was really interesting to have that be the way that he explored all these different dynamics that were raising up in his country that he could see and warn against. And being anti-capitalism worked with being anti-slavery, because if they weren't trying to press the cotton and the cotton industry and trying to make more and more wealth, then they wouldn't have needed all the slaves to do that. And so you can see why he would criticize and warn against those things, but how he had to do it in a way that wasn't outright calling it what it was, because the country was already delving closer and closer into this civil war. And so he did it just like any other writer who's trying to criticize a government that's not safe to criticize. He did it through literature and storytelling, and by masking a bit of what he was actually trying to say. But it's all there if you're just looking for it. And it's why it keeps growing in popularity as the world powers continue to try to dominate the world, try to continue to colonize or start war with or control. And you can see how it resonates with the people who are being oppressed or at risk of being controlled or taken over or bombed or invaded. It still resonates, and it's really a testament to the longevity of him as a writer, but the depth in which he did this in a way that maybe it wasn't really noticeable when he was writing it. It was not popular, and it did not make him all kinds of money in his time. But look what it has become since, and how each time period or country or person in society claims it as their own and sees their own fights and injustices and frustrations and struggles all within the pages of this really, really fantastic story. I'm sorry that I was rambling and kind of all over the place. I had most of it outlined, but then it would remind me of something else, and then I kind of got a little bit slower. So please, I hope that you stayed with it. I hope that talking about, it starts with telling you what happens at the end, so I'm hoping that I didn't spoil it for anyone. It's a well-known enough story that I would assume that most people at least know the gist of what happens, and so I hope that I didn't ruin that. But I hope that if anyone who was wondering if it's worth it or fully not understanding it, if you would give it another shot, kind of going in there with your own research, or now with some of this a little extra discussion and knowledge, might help you appreciate it a little bit more, because I know that learning about it myself made me appreciate it a whole lot better. So thank you for bearing with me, for being here, and for loving the discussions and loving to read as much as I do. So thank you and happy reading.